Hey, another episode. Welcome back, Rush Hour Pod. I'm TW. This is Justin.
Hey
It's
y'all.
not. This is not Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker this time. I I had a little business trip this week. I thought we'd talk about a little conversation I had with an Uber driver before we get to all the cool topics for the week. And I kind of wanted to get your take on like side hustles before we get going.
Let's do it, man. That sounds great.
So I was on a business trip this week. Got in the Uber, and it was like a brand new Polestar. One of those new electric cars. Like, oh, this is really nice. You just get it
Mm-hmm.
in the and he's like, yeah, I got it about 2 months ago, and it's straight from Uber. And I was like, what do you mean? He's
So
like,
he's leasing it,
I
right?
yeah. He's like, I'm renting it from Uber, and it's $50 a day. And he was like, so my
Ooh.
math. He was like, yeah, that sounds kind of expensive. I was like, yeah, it's not horrible though. And he worked it out. So he's like, hey, basically, I need to give one ride from the airport, and it pays for my car. So he was like, I give up hour, sometimes 2 hours a day, and I get a free car. So he's like, I don't even think about anything else other than I get to use the car permanently as long as I can cover the payments. So that's his side hustle. He has a regular job. And then to pay for his car, he just Ubers enough to pay for the car. And then he's like, hey, when I have time, I Uber some more. Because you rent the car, Uber sends you additional business, and you get like preferred whatever rates.
Yeah.
So he's like, hey, there's a lot of benefits. I don't waste a lot of time doing this. I pay Uber a little bit more. I give them a brief 50, but I don't need a car now. And he was like, I had a car. I was doing it on my own on the side, but I didn't find it very good, very like
Mm.
useful. And it was burning miles on my car. And now I've just got this car, which I drive to work. And when I want to take a break, when I leave, I go to the airport, I pick up a ride, I go home. I'm done for the day, and my car is free. And I just the way he was talking about it, I'm like, that's really cool. Just like that, the hack of his side hustle to get him a car. And then
Yeah.
he's like, yeah. The only issue is like, I'm always on. I don't like every weekend I got to do it when I go on
Yeah.
vacation, like all of that. But he was like, all that aside, overall, I like it. It's not like, for the times it's inconvenient, it totally makes up for the time that it's great that I have an extra free car that
Yeah.
I can do
So
errands and run around.
does he not have any other car? Like this is the only car that he has, or he wanted
No,
an
he
extra car
has
because he has a
another
family?
car, and
Okay.
he had another car. He abused it for Uber. It got in an accident, and it got he put a bunch of miles on it, and he was like, man, this is really not worth it. Like the
Mm-hmm.
deterioration of my car, and just doing this on the side for a little bit. So then he tried this route. He was just like, I'm going to try it for a month, and he's found it like very like freeing in terms of his mind, and energy. Why he's just like, hey, I
Yeah.
get a free car. Like there's a joy that comes with it every day when he drives it to work to do other things. That he's like, yeah, I got this car for free. I hacked the system. Like
Mm.
I got a $50,000 car for free. And I just thought, that's a pretty cool side hustle. And I was going to talk about like the sort of me and you have talked about the energy around a side hustle. While it may not make you money, it may not even make you anything. It may be all headache, but there is like an experience and joy that comes with it. Like I started Locker Room Access, you know, right after UVA won the national championship, as sort of like more like giving back to the community, but I'm already doing it because I love it, and then building a little business around that, and that's been brought like I mean, I never tried to make it into a moneymaker. It's more just for like the passion and the joy, but
Yeah.
obviously it has some potential. Like if
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to go all in and like expand it to every school and do the thing, there's a real opportunity there. But it's also like, from my own experience, it's been like a lot of fun and a lot of energy, and to me, worth every moment that I've done it. I kind of wanted to get your opinion on side
Yeah.
hustles and your thoughts on it.
Oh, for sure. Well, before we do that, why don't you give people a little more background on like locker room access and what it is and kind of all the components? Because I feel like obviously you did it because it's a passion. It was initially started out as a passion project. You
Yeah,
have a lot of love for the school and the players want to give back, but it
right.
evolved not just from like an apparel play, which was initially, but to like media, et cetera. So I think that might be kind of interesting, just to set up for people who aren't as
Sure.
familiar
I mean,
with.
so how it got started actually, we were at the Final Four. I know a bunch of the players. You know, you see all their stuff in the back. I met them through the coaching staff at UVA. I'm a huge Virginia basketball fan. I've kind of gotten to know them like family over the years. And a lot of the players I'd gotten to know fairly well, not like the greatest friends in the world, but like when we see each other, we're really happy to see each other. And we went to the Final Four, and as you know, I don't know people that don't watch basketball. Virginia had this incredible run. We had a horrible loss the year before. The next year we had these miraculous wins. We got to the Final Four, which is like almost the penultimate thing for sports, and at least in college sports. And we won a game on last second free throws. Everyone is so excited. We go to dinner, and it's like a few of the players. I had made special shirts. I had just like thought would be fun to wear our own shirts, and everybody loved the shirts. Like literally, people on the streets were like, "I'll give you money for that shirt off your back." And like, you know, a couple of the guys who were in the NBA and stuff were wearing them, and they were just like, "This is wild! Like people really
Yeah.
love." And we're at dinner, and one of them said, "T-Dub, you're in business and you're working. Why don't we shouldn't wait for a Final Four? Why don't you do something that we'll all back you, we'll all be behind you. Why don't you create some kind of business where we don't have to do it at a Final Four? We can get together and we can talk sports, and we can rally all of this together for sort of UVA and our community." And maybe it'll turn into something. And he was like, "I don't know what that is." And his point was like, "This is not my expertise. I
Mhm.
just see your passion and your ability. I would just like you to do that, and we'll help." So then I went back, wrote up sort of a business plan, and a deck about like, hey, what if normally it's like a fan creates a fan site and then fans interact. I'm like, what if a player did that? And what if it was a player doing that, and then it was benefiting all former players and current players, and then fans could then get connected into the world of the former player, former coaches, current play, all of that world, like connect those two dots.
Right.
So called it locker room access, which is literally like giving people locker room access.
Which is a great name,
Um,
by the way. Like
yeah, I
that was a
appreciate that.
finesse.
So,
That
yeah,
was pretty good.
sort of searched around. I was like, hey, what if we gave fans locker room access into the players' minds, into the coaches' minds, whenever possible? I'm not saying we're giving away the secrets of the sauce or anything, but it was like, hey, we could do podcasts, we could do that. The gear as well, like the clothing, we could do all the things that they do on their personal, just like bring people in where they, you know, athletes are regular people. Many times people just think of them as like, hey, you guys are here to play sports. I don't care about anything else you do. Versus like, hey, some of them love clothing, some of them love video games, some of them love science, and like they're multifaceted people like everyone else. It was like, hey, what if we highlight that? Some people really are interested. So we started a podcast, we dropped some gear, we did all these different, we did like a charity tournaments, we started dabbling in all these things. And it really started to take off because obviously people saw the energy around it, right? Because it was like, for the first time you were hearing stuff from players that you normally wouldn't hear from straight from them. And it took off, right? We got before it was like, we had a little forum, maybe we had a couple Q&As in there. It was kind of crickets. Now it's like, we get a couple 100,000 people chiming in and reading about it every month.
That's so
The
crazy, and it's
podcast,
still at that it's still at that
yeah,
level. No,
yeah.
that's
If you
awesome.
log in, I can put the link down there. If you look in,
Yeah,
all the people make a post about a thing that happened in sports, and it gets thousands of views and a bunch of replies, and it's like an active community on the forum. And then our podcast, we invited all these, we kind of hit jackpot with the podcasting during COVID, and we hit, tons and tons of former players and had them on and talking about the game. And obviously, I have such passion for it, and I remember so much of it. It kind of was a perfect match, and that's how it really got started. And it was like, there's been many times where we're like, hey, let's go to another school, let's do this thing, let's make it huge. But that's hard. That's hard to find someone that has the energy and the passion to do this. And truthfully, I never made a penny off of it. And it was everything was to give back. And we've talked about in the past, like doing campaigns where we're raising money for charities, doing the campaign where we're raising money for NIL, doing campaigns, we're raising money for former athletes, all these things.
Yep.
Incredible sort of community and platform. But really, so far, it's kind of operated like a not for profit, and I haven't
Yeah,
delved into like making it, the most profitable thing on earth.
for
That
sure.
was not my goal.
Yeah, but I think it's really interesting that you talk about it in this way as like a side hustle, but it's also not necessarily something that's like monetizing you directly in a way where you're making, you know, crazy money, but
No.
that it works. So maybe you could dive a bit into like why a side hustle can be something that you're not necessarily monetizing, but still getting a lot of value from, and like how you think about that in terms of the time and energy you put in. Because I think that's like a different type of thinking around a side hustle concept than people talk about on YouTube or other channels of like how they're leveraging side hustles.
Yeah, like there's Manesh talked about it in the last one. Doing something you're passionate about is like incredibly fulfilling. Like when you do it, there is an energy and a passion that comes behind it, and with the when you get older and you have kids and you have family and you have priorities, a lot of times you need a business to operate around, because otherwise you're just doing it selfishly, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
the business and the community almost becomes like an excuse to to be more focused on the thing you love. So that a lot of that was from that. Well, part of it for me, right, which was like now that it was a thing, like this is a business which has a lot of people and a lot of you know dollars behind it, in terms of like people are investing time and energy into it, and it's become an entity. Then the commitment is different from on my point, and I love it, right? But now that there's like, hey, I have a purpose. I'm doing this for this company, versus like, hey, I'm going to watch a game with my friends.
Mm-hmm.
That can easily be deprioritized. But when it's like, hey, I'm going to we're doing a live show for a community here, we're committed. It just like you can see where it would feel different, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm I'm still committed to spending time watching the games and doing it, but now there's like a vision and a purpose behind it, and it never was it about. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, yes, you want it to be successful and you want it to earn money, but it was never like for me personally. It was just like, hey, I'd love to keep this thing going and give back to it so that it becomes a bigger thing where I get more enjoyment out of it. Because
Yeah.
for me, it was that. It was really enjoyment.
I really love that because I feel like a lot of times we get roped into something that you're working on having to have some kind of purely economic value or
Right.
incentive tied to it, where if you've invested a certain amount of time and it hasn't kind of worked out, like it's been a failure. And I don't think that's been the case based off of like other things I worked on. I worked on a failed apparel startup when I was in
Yeah.
college at
Right.
Harvard. And, you know, that engendered interest in just entrepreneurship for me, which carried forward and you know, played a huge role in my career and life. And so I don't think, yeah, I think it's these things aren't black and white, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're
And I,
talking
and
about a
I
side
look at
hustle
that.
and kind of values.
No, totally. I look at that Uber driver as an example. Like if you had told somebody else, "Al, you're an Uber driver. How much do you make?" And he's like, "Oh, I make, I don't know, a couple $100 a month." He doesn't think about it that way. He's like, "I got a
Yeah.
free car. I got a $50,000 car for free. That's what I make out of it. So I get to drive it around and I save my own car." That's different. It just had a different feel for him. I could tell, like for him, it was a piece of like he felt like he hacked the system and is using Uber to his advantage to get a nice car that he normally wouldn't have bought.
Yeah.
Um, so there's little stuff like that where I just think for people out there that are like considering it, yeah, I agree. Do not. I mean, if you the thing that's I guess fleeting is that money piece, right? If you're gonna do it just for the dollars, it's hard. Like it's
It's
hard.
too hard. Yeah. It's
It's
almost too
really
hard to
hard.
do it just
You
for
you
that.
need yeah. It's like if you're gonna do it just as an investment and you expect a return, like your percentages are playing against you, and it's harder to battle the low points of the sort of that roller coaster ride, um, because you're gonna be like, this isn't worth my time anymore because I'm not making enough money. I'll go do something else.
Yeah.
But if the backing is, hey, I'm doing this for an experience, or I'm doing this for a free car, and long term I'm going to get this thing, then that fuel tends to burn a little longer,
Yeah.
to get you through those tough, rough periods.
Got it.
Because as go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say like so. It seems like takeaway is like you should have some type of outcome in your mind that you're driving towards, but it doesn't necessarily need to be an economic
Yes.
outcome per se. I mean, knowledge or just happiness or, figuring out kind of like a hack or unique way to solve an existing problem.
Right.
I
I
think
mean,
I think that's great.
you look at our podcast here
Yeah.
when we originally started, it was like not to we're not trying to make $1 million here. It's more like, hey, it's a good excuse to talk about as a forcing function. Get together, we get to talk, we get to chat, we get to make content, and then we get to figure this thing out together. And it's a lot of
100%.
fun. Like, yeah,
100%. In the other piece that you had brought up at the time when we were thinking about this was like, you have all this content that is then out there that like your kids or family members, other people can kind of watch
right.
down the line and get a
Yeah,
sense of who you were at that time, at that point in time in your life. And that's kind of like a nice keepsake. And that's like a very
yeah,
sentimental way of
yeah,
thinking about it as well. But that also really resonated with me in terms
yeah.
of the investment.
Yeah, this is kind of like a time capsule, right? Like instead of burying it in the backyard, it's on YouTube. Unfortunately, I don't know what you how we think about that, but it's kind of cool.
No, I think it's good. And I think that, what I've seen through, I probably say this every episode. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn and kind of build, brand building and there, and even platforms like Instagram, et cetera. This is like a forcing function to learn more about a platform
Yeah,
that I think is going to become more and more important. I mean, YouTube is already really important, but there's just so much value in kind of expressing your ideas, creating a personal brand, like understanding how these different channels and platforms work and able to give you ideas
yeah,
and opportunities that wouldn't exist otherwise if you're just kind of like myopically focused on these other lanes. That it's good to just kind of put yourself out there and just
yeah.
figure out how these platforms work.
And another piece like bringing Manish on, sort of having a platform, a place where you can showcase other people too that you care about and have interesting stories. It's cool too. Like that's another piece. I mean, it kind of came up and about, but I was like, hey, the more we can do that, the better too. So speaking of your LinkedIn, I thought we could jump into that too.
Oh, in terms of like some of the oh
Some of the topics this week.
oh yeah. So definitely let's jump into the topics this week. So like something that kind of I guess relates to what you were saying on the side hustle piece and kind of gig economy and those type of jobs. Obviously, everyone's familiar with Uber, and I think more people are becoming familiar with like Waymo, which is an autonomous vehicle company. And I think for a long time they were at odds, but recently, I think as of today, actually, us filming this, there are plans now to for Waymo and Uber to not only partner, but to deploy Waymo's robo taxis in Austin and Atlanta starting next year to deepen the partnership between them. And so I think, initially they were rivals, or a bunch of trade secret stuff, a bunch of like consternation around 2018. But this collaboration really shows kind of a growing reliance on, or not necessarily reliance, but like a growing interest of Uber to kind of get into the robo taxi space. Obviously, they've kind of mapped all these different routes. They have a
Yep.
tremendous amount of data, and they're going to deploy this to all these different cities. So kind of shows where their strategy is heading, and also the impacts of everything that we've talked about in the past, which around AI and
Yeah.
either loss of jobs or different ways that people have to kind of figure out how to navigate this. And it's at least where we live in the Bay Area, 4 or 5 years down the line, it could be 20-30% of fleets, even
Yeah.
more, where you're going to have these robo taxis. So I just thought that was kind of like an interesting recent partnership and news relative to some of the stuff we've been talking about.
Yeah, and on that note, I was on this business trip this past week, and I didn't rent a car. I used Ubers, and there was the number of times that my Uber got lost, and I wasn't going to a lot of places, like going to the office, going to somebody else's office. It's like multiple times it got lost. So I'm like, ooh, this is not ideal. I can imagine, when you've got these robo taxis, you're going to have less of those issues. So
Yeah.
that'll be interesting.
And freeing up time, right? Like, I think there's just, I don't know. Well, I mean, if you're freeing up time, I mean, like the person is driving you around, but like if you kind of know you're going to get to a route, if you like, don't feel like you necessarily have to be performative within there, kind of using it more as like, utility, and the same thing as getting on a train or something like that. I think it makes people kind of more efficient. And yeah, man, the rate and pace of the progress here is just like astounding. I feel like we're just in this new version of industrial revolution around AI, and like, whereas we've been seeing a lot of stuff in the digital world with kind of chat GPT, OpenAI, all these LMs platforms are out there, you're starting to see more of an encroach into the physical world. And, the combination of those two is, uh, it's exciting, but also daunting in some ways.
Yeah, and little things like I've noticed I'm ordering a lot of meals on iPads, and then people are going to just deliver the food. And I've also done the vice versa. We've gone to restaurants where you order the food from a waiter or waitress, and the food gets delivered by a robot. It seems like we're like right there with full service robotics, ordering yourself and then a robot delivering seems to be no longer the Jetsons. This is coming very very soon.
Oh yeah, no, it's here in a lot of these test markets. I think what the question becomes is like, not to get too deep in this, it kind of becomes somewhat of a moral issue relative to like, how much are we going to let technology and AI and all these platforms that make us more efficient, but kind of remove either jobs or kind of a human element away from different experiences that take us further from what it means to have like a human experience now in some ways. And maybe that's too deep, but I don't know. Maybe you somewhat resonate with that thinking.
Yeah, especially with this next generation. Like I think our two generations probably sort of yearn for human connection a little more. I think the next generation is sort of just adapted to not having it and thinks it's
Mm.
weird when you have to call someone, when you have to talk to someone, when you have to interact with someone. It's frustrating, which that's that I think that's just like the evolution of man at this point.
Yeah. How far will we go though? How far will we go? Are we just, maybe we were 50 steps away from, Ready Player One, but maybe we're only 20 steps away for that now, relative to just people becoming more comfortable spending less time around humans, or less of the kind of like day-to-day tasks that they need, people for. I think it's really interesting to see how that's going to like rewire people's brains.
Yeah, it seems what it seems like is the small talk. I guess are those
Yeah.
in those
Yeah.
smaller interactions are just slowly disappearing, and it's weird, right? Because a lot of times, I'll randomly remember when somebody says something to me. It's like a meaningless thing, but if they're like, "Hey, I like your socks." I don't know. I'm just making something up, but like, right? You're walking by and some random person says something to you. Sometimes I remember those little interactions, and if those are slowly going away, I don't know. I don't. It seems like we'll be missing something, but maybe not. Maybe we're going to get rid of sort of that, and just your real relationships with family and friends, that those remain. Maybe that's ultimately where we're going. It's hard
Yeah.
to tell.
Well, speaking of the takeover of AI and the robots and all that means, OpenAI also had, a few pieces of kind of like news that came out. So the first was around, some investor talks to raise additional 6.5 billion at $150 million, 150 million, I can't even say it right because it sounds so crazy, $150 billion pre-money valuation. And this is significantly higher than like the 86 million from before. I think it's being led by Thrive Capital. A couple other investors are in it, including Microsoft, Apple, Nvidia. I think we talked a bit about like, it's really interesting. You have all these kind of frenemies or competitors all investing in the same company. What will that mean down the line? And I think they're also thinking about raising like $5 billion in debt from a few banks. It's just a lot more investment. You kind of think that when you kind of think you're at the top. I don't know if we're there yet. Like, it's still a tremendous amount of money getting invested in here. Just maybe a general comment on them being able to continue to raise this money, maybe what it means for the company and the markets generally.
Yeah, I mean, we hear it over and over. It seems like the the computing power and the development power to do these is the cost is exponentially higher. I think we heard Google's former founder talk about that. Like now, companies no longer need 10 million. It's in the billions, right? Like it keeps getting more and more for these asks to scale these companies. It kind of makes sense, right? We've talked about it, and I've met with a bunch of founders. The issue that everyone seems to run into is like building real habits, and like people
Mm-hmm.
are like stuck in their way. I don't think stuck is the right. People are accustomed to their 5 apps they use and the things that they're doing, and it's hard to break in for new companies. Um, and the only way to do it is sort of integrate into those 5 things that everyone is doing. Right now, it's Facebook, TikTok, Google, all of these become so now you're sort of having to like blend your products and your future into these things that everyone's already doing.
Yeah.
That seems to be why everything is so expensive, right? Because you're ultimately like, I have to continue to change the infrastructure and work with these giant companies because this is, if you want to reach everybody, you're going to have to do a deal with Apple because the phones in their ecosystem, or you're going to have to
Mm-hmm.
do something with Google. It's pretty scary. Like this is where we are. Like it's going to be hard for a company sort of start up in their basement and turn into an everyday app. It seems like those days are numbered or over. Is more like you need more help, right?
Yeah, well, it's actually interesting that you bring that up because the other piece of news which you had mentioned was around Y Combinator
Yep.
and some news around like how they are now having 4 cohorts a year instead of 2. So you
Yep.
kind of have this juxtaposition between the challenges of
Yeah.
creating a startup within this new world, but then players like a Y Combinator are saying, okay, well, I don't know if the cohorts are smaller, but ostensibly, if they are bringing more people in, they're actually trying to recruit more startups. So, how do you kind of maybe square that in your mind, or what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, that's when we talked about it right before. That's the part where I'm trying to wrap my head around. Like, is it trying to get more velocity? Is it trying to get more niche? I'm not sure. It's an interesting tack to double the cohorts and maybe get more focused within each one because they were getting a little too broad. But yeah, it seems like this is the real problem that we're dealing
Mm-hmm.
with, right? Like everyone is running into the scaling issue of like, all right, now if I'm trying to build something to get into the habits and get into the minds of routines of everyday people to get real scale, it's hard. Like today, it's
Yeah,
really, really hard. Yeah.
when I think about like a Y Combinator and how they're able to maybe continue to recruit talent, I'm imagining also continue to raise funding. Is I think you have this consolidation within the valley, particularly within kind of the venture ecosystem. So think of like the venture funds, but also accelerators, incubators, where returns aren't as great now from the funds that existed like in the kind of 2022 period. For now, fewer sovereign wealth funds or pension funds, et cetera, are going to invest in this space. They're still allocating it as a percentage of the portfolio, but it's kind of going to the top tier, funds that have been around forever, right? The Sequoias, Y Combinators, the founders funds, et cetera, the ones that have kind of proven out value, like outside of that kind of bubble period of VC. So I think, a lot of that value is going to accrue to the top. And then you have that entire middle layer. And I think that's going to get shrunk even more over time. And
Right.
I think it'll accelerate even more over the next few years.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting next few years and we've talked about it before, right? Like that, who this next generation of entrepreneurs, who's coming out of it, and we've kind of built an ecosystem or a walled garden that makes it really hard for that next generation to get into, frankly. So, Mr. Beast being the one that I can think of, but he's really working on a platform and building his legacy within that, which is kind of amazing that he's done it. Like, what is the next thing that's coming? I mean, Sam Altman obviously is doing it. It's gonna be interesting.
Yeah. You got to build and own your own audience. Like, relative to all the changes that are like all these technology changes are going to continue to happen. All these new platforms are going to continue to be built. The speed and pace of AI and all this new tech
Right.
is just like exponential, and it feels like every 2 weeks there's kind of something. So what's the competitive differentiation that you have when you're creating a business? In my mind, it's kind of two things. One is it's like, a real audience. At the end of the day, you're interacting with human beings that are going
Yep.
to be watching your content or making purchases, et cetera. You can't like create synthetic people who are making payments to, to your business.
Right.
So your ability to kind of to build and maintain and own that audience and take it with you to other platforms is really important. And then, the other piece outside of your ability to own your audience is just like that unique data as well that comes with the audience, because like that's the only like new data, new kind of interactions, people on these platforms. That's the thing. That's like the competitive differentiator you have. So like you got to own the actual audience, own like their contact information, all those other things that you kind of bring across, but then their data as well. And so I think those companies that are able to do that really well will succeed. And I'm kind of looking at like maybe Reddit in that ilk, others that have kind of maintained like a really have a very unique data set, and also a lot of like strong, um, unique data set, and a lot of kind of strong kind of brand affinity where people are following, are continuing to kind of use the platform. And then from a creator perspective, it's like, okay, yeah, if you have a large platform like a Mr. Beast, what else are you doing to kind of make sure that you are, owning and maintaining that data source?
Yeah, it's gonna be an interesting time. We always say this. I feel like every episode, man. What's about to
It's
come?
still true.
Yeah, it is wild to think like we're definitely in the Wild West right now, in terms of where we are. So it'll be fun to keep an eye on and talk about. All right, man. Appreciate you. Anything else this week? I think
I think,
maybe
if
not.
there's anything else just to kind of close out on news for the week, for OpenAI, they did introduce a new AI model. It's called OpenAI O1, which is like a market shift from how they've been doing their models previously. So what they're doing now is they're using reasoning to solve complex thinking, instead of doing it like by doing it like step by step. And again, this is for people who are not as technical, right? So I'm not going to get super into the weeds, but essentially what this is able to do is kind of like attack problems that used to stump older models, like advanced math, advanced chemistry type of questions. This new way that the model processes information allows them to do that. And the CTO of OpenAI said that like this is introducing a new paradigm for AI focused reasoning, along with scale, as they're continuing to work on larger GPT-5 models. So take a look. It's called, Open One, new model that was released, and apparently it's making, continuing to make the capabilities of the models more complex using the step by step approach.
Amazing. All right, take a look. Maybe we'll give feedback next week
Yeah, man.
and check it out. Cool,
Full
man.
show.
Appreciate your time.
Yeah.
Till
Make
next week.
sure if y'all are liking the content, like and subscribe. If there are any kind of topic areas you want us to check out, we're always happy to do that. And again, you're just getting a fly on the wall view of what's on our mind week to week. So hopefully
Yeah.
it's valuable, and happy to help the community.
Talk soon.
All right, talk soon.